On this episode of the Two Car Garage, the Dune Buggy's front structure gets finish welded and painted. Alright, so on this support here, some of the things we're going to try to accomplish today. First, just getting it cleaned up. This has been sitting for 10 years. That was when we welded all this up the first time around. And it was never prepped and painted at that time. So it's got some rust on it. We got to get that taken care of. All the welds are still messy, so we want to grind and clean those up a little bit. We also want to put in a clutch pedal stop, just something in this region to stop the clutch pedal from hitting the fiberglass. And then the last thing we're going to try to accomplish is I bought a pack of these gussets, and what we'll do is we'll take these gussets and we're going to gusset all the corners. That might be overkill for what this does. It's pretty rigid right now. Ultimately, all it's doing is holding up the steering wheel, and then the windshield will attach to it. But it'll be a pretty quick job welding these gussets in, and it'll just make us feel a whole lot better. So first things first, while we still have the steering column in, we're going to mark and cut the support that we're going to use for the clutch pedal stop. We want to get that all figured out now so we can get rid of the steering column before we actually start the welding. For this clutch pedal stop, what we're going to do here is we're just going to take a piece of flat stock here, and that's actually going to rest right up here. We'll weld it up at the top, and then once we get the bottom trimmed to match the shape of this crossbar, we'll weld it in down there. So now when I depress the clutch pedal, that will actually run right into that piece. So what we're going to do here is we'll get this lined up right where we want it. So we want that end there, the top end. We want to make sure that there's enough space that it's not going to actually hit the steering column here. So I think we're going to put that right there. Double check my clutch pedal. And now, to get this angle here, I'm just simply going to take a marker and drag that right across this here. So now I know what angle to cut the bottom of this brace at. And I'm also going to put a mark up here for the moment, just so I know where I had that lined up. I'm going to mark the top of the brace here so I know where to cut that off, and now we can go ahead and get that cut to size here. With this piece now cut to the right angles here, what we'll do is we'll lay this on here. We'll line this up with our original marker line, and just temporarily here I'm going to clamp this in place. And now we'll check, make sure that the pedal still lines up right in the middle. So that piece is now ready to weld in. What we're going to do, because the column is going to be gone when we put this together, I'm going to go ahead and put a mark here at the end of where this is going to be, and then I also have a mark here where it's going to line up front to back. And we already have a line up here. So what we'll do is we're going to take and score a couple of lines in here. We'll just use a cutoff wheel for that. So once we grind all the slag and rust off here, we'll know exactly where that has to get placed. So now that we've got that positioned, we can go ahead and pull the steering column off, and then we can start figuring out where we're going to put all of our gussets here. Each corner we want to have a gusset for support, and what we want to do right now is just go around and mark all the areas that we want to clean up, so we know what to grind and sand to prep for welding. So for instance, we're going to put one gusset right here like this. And so all I need to do for the moment is just mark the areas where the gusset's going to be, so I know how much paint and rust and welding slag I need to clean up. So we're going to put one there. While I still have this clutch pedal brace in place, I'm going to slide up and figure out where I want to put this one. That will actually fit here. And we can put that in first, and then we can put in the clutch pedal brace. Down here, we know we need to get rid of all this here, and then we'll clean the ends up on that. So now it's just really a matter of going around and marking all the rest of it to figure out where we want to place it. With all of the areas marked for where the gussets are going to be, we now know what needs to be cleared off. Last thing before we actually get to that is we can remove this stop bracket now. And I do want to go in and make a couple of light cuts with a cutoff wheel just to mark the position of where that brace is supposed to be, because once we clear all this away for welding, I won't have any of those witness marks anymore. So I'm just going to take a small cutoff wheel and we're just going to go ahead and mark this. So now that we've got these marks ground into place here, when I take my stop bracket here, I now have a place to line up to, so I know exactly where it needs to be welded. This will allow me to put it in the right spot, even though I'm going to be grinding off all of this marker. So really all that's left to do before we start welding is to go ahead and clean off all the welding points. Just get rid of the rust and the slag and some of the mill scale that's left on this steel, and then we can start welding. So we're going to go ahead and pull this piece back off so we can get at all the spots we need to grind. And once we have that done, then we can start putting things in place and start welding it up. So now that we've got this support off here, we can go ahead and start grinding. Part of what we're going to be doing here is we're going to try to clean up some of these old welds, just to make them look a little better, as well as clean off the area that we're going to be welding. So we've got an 80 grit disc on here, which should cut pretty quick through these welds, as well as clean up that surface. So we're going to get started here and see how this goes. Well, we've got everything ground, everything we need to grind for the moment anyway. So really, what we're going to do now is we're just going to put this back on the car, get everything bolted down tight, and then we're going to clean up all this grinding dust that we just created. So we're just going to do a little cleanup here, get this back on the car, and then we'll be right back with you. All right, so the support is now mounted again. We got all the bolts nice and tight. While I was doing my cleanup work, I went ahead and took the gussets that we're going to be using, and I ground all the edges of that to prep those, just so there's no problems with those welding. One problem we're going to have here while we're welding, we've got all this fresh paint, we've got some plastic here around the master cylinder. We want to make sure that all that's protected. So in anticipation of that, I just picked up a fiberglass welding blanket. And we'll take that and we'll lay that over all of our areas we want to protect. One issue with these fiberglass welding blankets is they will still melt. So if I get a lot of real hot slag on the cloth, it'll still burn through. To help with that, I also picked up a smaller flame-proof blanket. This is a welding blanket made of carbon fiber. So what we'll do is wherever we're welding, if I've got stuff up close like the pedal cluster here, we'll take and we'll cover that up, and that should help save our paint and any of our plastic or rubber parts. All right, so we're all set up here to make our first weld. We're going to put this gusset in right up in here. Alright, so we got the first one tacked in place here. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the lower one here. Okay, so we got most of the gussets tacked in place now. We still have to get the other side taken care of here. But what we'll do is we'll get those tacked on there, make sure everything's nice and solid, and then we're going to go ahead and pull this cage back off and fully weld everything. Alright, so we've got all the welding taken care of here. Went through and double checked, made sure we didn't miss any spots. Test fit it on the car just to make sure nothing warped or moved, and it fits just like it did before. So I'm going to call this all set to go. All we need to do now is go through and we're going to grind some of the slag that ended up on the surface here. There's a couple of spots close to some bolt holes we want to clean up and make sure we can still get a nut and bolt in there. But other than that, it's really just a matter of getting it cleaned up, prepping the surface, and getting some paint on there. So we've got everything cleaned up here. We got the welds cleaned up as much as necessary. I made sure that all the bolts still fit flush. There was no welding slag in the way. And then I went ahead and took some 220 grit sandpaper and sanded everything down. It's not 100% perfect, but it's going to be fine for what we're doing. So now the next step is to wipe this down. We're going to get this cleaned up. I'm just going to use some of this grease and wax remover here just to make sure we don't have any oils or anything on there to get in our way for the paint adhesion, as well as remove the remaining grinding dust. Once we have that done, then we're going to throw on a coat of some self-etching primer. and that should prep it for our black paint. All right, with this all dried up now, everything's nice and clean and ready to go. We're going to go ahead and slap some paint on here. So we're going to start on the bottom side. So I'm just going to flip this over. And we're going to be using this self-etching primer here. Everything I've painted on this car, I've been using Dupli-Color, so if I ever have to do any touch-ups, that'll make it easier. We got the cans all shook up here, so really it's just a matter of getting going. Now it looks like we got everything coated on the bottom here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let this set up for 10 or 15 minutes just so the feet get dry. Then we'll flip it over and then we'll get the top side primed. It looks like we got everything here. I don't see any bare spots. So now we're just going to let this sit for about 30 minutes. We want this primer to be all the way dry here. And then we'll go ahead and throw on our black paint. So 30 minutes, we'll flip this back over and repeat the process. So there we've got everything painted up now. We've got 2 coats of paint. Looking at the surface up close now, it's actually looking pretty good. At this point, we really have to let this sit before we can do anything else. So we're going to leave it go for tonight, and tomorrow we'll take a look and see how it is. Alright, so here it is, 24 hours later. Things are looking pretty good. We went ahead and set it in place. I'm pretty happy overall with the paint quality. But I'll tell you what, if you want to see just how bad you are at welding, go ahead and paint it black. I see a lot of spots that could be a lot nicer looking, but what are you going to do? I'm not worried about strength, so we're going to call it good. In case you were curious, the paint that we used, you saw the primer earlier, the self-etching primer. The black is just a semi-gloss black. All of the frame components that we've painted have been painted with the same paint. The nice thing about doing that is if I have any scratches or anything like that, I can go ahead and touch it up pretty easily. Well, that's going to do it for this one. We're pretty happy with this project. Make sure you come back for the next episode. We probably will be getting the engine installed and hopefully getting things running. So if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. That'll let you know anytime we get a new video up. But again, I think we're all set. Thanks for watching. Take care.